Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We will turn our attention next. I suppose, actually, I'm sort of putting the other side of the scales on this, having spent the first hour and two of yesterday's programme trying to once again unpick the curious appeal of Jeremy Corbyn. Today we turn our attention to the gentleman who has topped the latest poll of Conservative members with regard to who they would most like to be leader, when Theresa May, who was yesterday suggesting that the Tories weren't ready to call a snap election. I tell you what, woe betide whoever's decision it was to call a snap election, when the Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party who called a snap election finds out who it was that called a snap election. I would not want to be in their shoes when Theresa May finds out who called that election. They are for the high jump. But when she is actually given the heave-ho, the runners and riders to replace her make for what a quite incredibly depressing reading, unless, I suppose, you're a masochist, in which case it's great. What's the definition of insanity? Has anyone ever checked whether this is true? The idea that Albert Einstein said it, or someone like that, the notion that the repetition of something, if you do something again and again, you keep doing the same thing in expectation of a different result. That's kind of like the definition of insanity. Giving Boris Johnson the benefit of the doubt seems to me to be pretty close to a case study in that theory. The man is almost unbelievably dishonest. It is not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact, it's a matter of historical record. It is clear that he is sexually incontinent. The man is absolutely incapable of staying faithful to anybody in his life, whether the wives that he's cheated on repeatedly or the mistresses that he discards and encourages to have abortions with, frankly, callous disregard. It is breathtaking that a man so utterly at odds with everything that the respectable wings of the Conservative Party are supposed to stand for can retain their affection and admiration on such an abiding scale. Even Michael Gove, who knows a thing or two about backstabbing, even Michael Gove concluded that Boris Johnson did not have the bottom to be the party leader, and it seemed to be a realisation built upon the revelation that self-interest motivates his every decision. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I'm going to tell you something that actually makes me feel a little bit ill. And that sounds a bit hyperbolic. It sounds a little bit over the top. It is probably surprising to anybody who's got Boris filed under court jester still. But there is a line in his biography of Churchill, which is not a book you should waste any time reading. There's a line in there that makes sense of the man. I'm saying this quite often at the moment on the programme. This desperate search for things that doesn't exist. It's a little bit banal on my part, but I can't help it. I want to find the keys. You know, it's because I played too many video games as a kid. So the idea that you can find a rock that slots in to a stone hole and then suddenly a massive gate opens and you gain entry into the hidden city. Not just old video games. It's a little like Drake's Fortune, that, isn't it? But I have this idea. I spent so much of my youth searching for single signets, single symbols, single little keys that would unlock huge swathes of new territories. And I have a similar approach to journalism. And every now and then I stumble across something that I think just sums stuff up. In his biography of Boris Johnson, of Winston Churchill, forgive me, Boris Johnson, to my mind, and this is certainly something we can discuss, he effectively, and I'm going to use the word accuses, so desperate is he, in every page of this book, to portray Churchill as a sort of prototype Boris Johnson, that he suggests Winston Churchill's decision early in the 1930s to campaign against Hitler was a cynical act of self-interest. That's how I read this. You're welcome to disagree with me, but if you want to understand this man, I think you need to think about this line. He writes in this book, to some extent, all politicians are gamblers with events. They try to anticipate what will happen to put themselves on the right side of history. I recognise that description of many politicians, but all of the politicians worthy of the sobriquet statesman would do the opposite of that, in my humble opinion. It is to do unpopular things that turn out to be correct, that make the real mark of a politician, of a statesman. Johnson flies in entirely the opposite direction to that thought, and it gets worse. He suggests that when Churchill, in the early 30s, ploughed a somewhat lonely furrow in British politics, a very lonely furrow in the sort of highfalutin circles whence Winston Churchill hailed, he was effectively, and I'm going to quote this to get it right, he put his shirt on a horse called anti-Nazism, and his bet came off in spectacular fashion. Our Foreign Secretary wrote those words, not some kind of ratings-chasing, pot-boiler writing thriller author. Our Foreign Secretary claimed that Winston Churchill's decision to oppose Nazism was a principle-free attempt to second-guess where history was going and placing himself on the right side of it subsequently. I would remind you that if Hitler had triumphed, if he had been ushered into Britain by many members of the aristocracy from which Winston Churchill hailed, if he had fulfilled the dreams of, for example, the man who owned the Daily Mail at the time, and become the Führer of these islands, the politicians who had led opposition to him would have been publicly executed. Standing up against far-right politics, standing up against Nazism, standing up against white supremacism isn't necessarily brave, because many people who do it feel fundamentally that they have no choice. They do it through a sense of duty. All that it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And to suggest that Boris Johnson believes, or not even, I'm not suggesting this, Boris Johnson clearly believes that Hitler's decision early in the 30s to swim against the tide of Chamberlain-esque appeasement, to swim against the tide of, there was a kind of Aryan supremacism abroad in the British aristocracy. You know this. You don't need to read, Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro if you want to look at fiction. If you want to look at fact, just read a history book from the era. Huge numbers, huge members of... We'd sit here now and pat ourselves on the back for being wonderful. When the Kindertransport began, when Jewish children were being spirited out of Nazi-occupied territories in order to spare them from the gas chambers, public opinion in this country was whipped up to oppose it. We don't want them here. Refugees, Jews, unaccompanied children, we don't want them here. And it worked, just like it works today. But with the benefit of hindsight, we think we were all welcoming and wonderful. We weren't. It took incredible bravery for people like Winston Churchill to stand up and say, we've got to, even if, we don't have a dog in that race at the moment, but the Nazis are on the march and we are going to have to fight them. We're going to have to stop them. And then you'd have people in Parliament say, it's none of our business. Lord Manchester, was it? Or Lord Liverpool? I get my northwestern cities mixed up. I think it was Lord Liverpool. No, we'd be fine. We can do business with these people. They. And then when you try to unpick Boris Johnson, which I've been doing ever since I got this job, almost actually, ever since he first ran for mayor when we were exclusively a London station, and obviously it was a very big part of what we did, to suggest that Hitler cynically supported the anti-Nazi cause for reasons of personal advancement would, to me, be the point at which anybody with a functioning conscience and intellect would see him for the charlatan that he is. But you don't. And that's fine, because, God, if we all saw the world in the same way, that would be absolutely stultifyingly boring. I'll give you that line again, because I think it's really important. To some extent, all politicians are gamblers with events. They try to anticipate what will happen to put themselves on the right side of history. God. To put themselves on the right side of history. I hold no candle for Margaret Thatcher, but God, when she formed the single market, she knew it was going to cause problems, but she knew it was brilliant for Britain. You do unpopular things. Sometimes they turn out to be right, in the case of the single market, bless her, memory, or sometimes they turn out to be wrong, in the case of the poll tax, but you don't second guess what the response will be. Jeremy Corbyn, bless his Hessian socks, isn't second-guessing what the response will be. He's sticking to the guns that he's been behind for 30 or 40 years, and whether you find those guns ridiculous or inspiring, you have to at least acknowledge that he's not changed his tune. Johnson literally admits in this book that politicians like him, and he extracts from that the idea that all politicians simply try to guess who's going to win and then throw their lot in with that side. Puts a curious new spin on his Brexit positioning, doesn't it? But here you go. Churchill, and I quote, put his shirt on a horse called anti-Nazism, and his bet came off in spectacular fashion. Wow. greatest wartime leader this country has ever had, essentially reduced to grubby opportunist by the patron saint of grubby opportunists. So where does that lead us? What question am I leading you towards this morning? I'm leading you towards this, and I've done it with Theresa May, actually, and let's just say that it wasn't exactly the most nourishing of experiences. And if I ask you what Boris Johnson stands for, you can't really ring me, can you? One of these days I'm going to come a cropper with these cocky experiments in unanswerable questions, whatever what's the opposite of rhetorical. I ask you what Boris Johnson stands for. I don't think you can ring me. I genuinely don't think you can ring me. You probably had a better chance of telling me what Theresa May stands for when we utterly failed to put any flesh on that particular bone last month. So that's probably not the question I should ask. Unless, of course, you do think you know what Boris Johnson stands for, apart from Boris Johnson. 0345 6060 973. So when then do we ask the second question, which would be, what, why do you like him? See, I fell into that trap. I still do. I got to tell you now, if he walks into the room, he's one of those people that you're kind of, even against your better judgment, pleased to see. He's funny, he's garrulous. What you see on the telly is a very carefully cultivated image that he happily pulls out of the bag whenever the occasion deserves. I was talking about him, I can't remember where. 3 different people. I've been doing loads of podcasts lately. I'm getting them all mixed up in my mind. But 3 different people told me that they'd witnessed him ruffle his hair before stepping onto a stage or before stepping onto a podium. A deliberate and cynical cultivation of that slightly sort of scruffy exterior, or when he pretends he doesn't know where he is and the audience lap it up because good old Boris. I fell for all of that. They're brilliant. Have I got news for you? So when the Conservative Party membership is asked who they would most want to succeed Theresa May, and they say Boris Johnson, what's going on? How can the Conservative Party that speaks of family values, speaks of fidelity? Churchill was an astonishingly faithful husband. I say astonishingly because the circles that he mixed in, even some members of his own family kind of wrote guidebooks on promiscuity and extramarital affairs. But Churchill was faithful to the point of uxoriousness. And how can a party that claims to care about family values, a party that claims to care about probity, integrity and honesty, a party membership that is supposed to represent in their minds, not necessarily in mind, the noblest of British traditions, continue its love affair with a man who makes a mockery of everything from his marriage vows to his political heroes? Reducing Winston Churchill to a cynical opportunist who only stood up against Hitler because he thought it would be a good career move. Oh boy. Phones haven't rung yet, so I'm going to suck it and see. Give me a call. What does Boris Johnson believe in? 0345 6060 973. You will get through. You really will get through. And then if no one's rung me by past, I'll come up with a different question. Just to spare you from the prospect of another interminable monologue, I will add the second question to the bit. What does Boris Johnson stand for? Why do people still like him, given that the evidence I've just provided you with is utterly incontrovertible? Every single syllable I've just spoken is truth, evidence-backed and provable. How can Conservative Party members still like him? He's a liar, he's a cheat, and he's treacherous to the point almost of pathology, but still you lap it up. 0345 6060 973. What does he stand for? You tell me. Why do you still like him? Why do other people still like him? God only knows. I've got further evidence. I've got more of that quote. That was the basis of much of his prestige in 1940, that he had made the right call about Hitler almost from the start. He had put his shirt on a horse called anti-Nazism, and he did it early at a time when no one much fancied the nag, and his bet came off in spectacular fashion. As if Winston Churchill wouldn't have stood up to Nazism if he didn't think that it might deliver professional advancement 10 years down the line. And that is Boris Johnson in a nutshell. He doesn't even pretend to hide it anymore, such as his absolute confidence in his own abilities or contempt for the people who believe in his abilities. Which is it? What does he stand for? Why are people still buying it? 22 after 10 is the time. Craig is in Beaconsfield. Bring it on, Craig!
Well, goodness, there's a build-up. I think you may be having difficulty getting callers because it's almost a null question, because I think what Boris stands for is Boris.
Well, then I move it on to what is it that the Conservative Party faithful are missing when they consider him to be the best person to replace Theresa May?
Well, because he's electorally, if I can say it, popular. I mean, if you remember the London mayoral elections, I think it was the second time he got in. There were also, I think, there's local elections at the same time,
yes,
possibly in the same day, and he was something like 10 points ahead of in the London mayoral race.
How the party performed elsewhere. He's party-proof in that sense, but that you give credit then to the Conservative membership for a kind of cynicism, and I don't mean that as an insult. You're saying that they can see through him. They do feel repulsed and soiled by his serial adultery, his inability to tell the truth, his absolute failure to provide anything remotely resembling probity. All the things Conservatives tell me that they stand for, Boris Johnson summarily rejects. They know all that, but they can live with it because it's more important to be in power than it is to have a Prime Minister with any principles.
Well, you maybe give them credit for having that level of...
No, I thought you were. I thought you were giving that.
Sorry, no. I'm saying that they're either unaware of it or they're prepared to turn a blind eye to it, because it's okay. There was a really mediocre film in the 1980s with Jane Seymour and Judge Reinhold called Head Office. In which Jane Seymour gets to quite a high position in this big conglomerate, and she then says that you do all these dirty things getting to a position of power for the kind of greater good, and then you reach this position of power and you can't remember what actually the sort of meritorious things you wanted to do when you're at the bottom of the ladder were.
That's a wonderful example that you use. I could think of a few popular culture references that explore the notion that absolute power corrupts absolutely without necessarily having to reach for the Jane Seymour Judge Reinhold back catalogue.
Well, okay, we're not going to go into Dr. Quinn Medicine.
You could have gone for King Lear.
Oh, come on. You're giving me far too much cultural
This is a James O'Brien programme, mate. You could have gone for Sophocles. You could have gone for Oedipus at Colonus. You didn't have to go for Judge Reinhold and... was it?
Well, you see...
Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. I think we all learnt a lesson from Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman that would be of great help during our analysis of the Wehrmacht era of... Oh, well played. So, I mean, briefly then, you see the opportunism. Where people who don't see it, are they pretending not to see it, or do they not care? What do you think? And I would like these people to ring me. I promise you we can all be friendly. It's Friday.
Well, I think to maybe half answer that question, but maybe the earlier question was, remember that I can't remember their names because they're not really important, but those two political mandarins who were fired by Theresa May after the last general election.
Yes.
There was a woman and a guy with a beard, and
Nick Timothy and Fiona something.
Yeah,
I think I've heard rumours that in the film they're going to be played by Judge Reinhold and Jane Seymour.
No, just mocking me. That's cruel. But apparently, when it was all coming out of the woodwork of how they behaved prior to the election, there was some by-election in whichever town, and they were just berating all of the Conservative Party members about the fact they haven't brought Boris up because Boris is like electoral gold.
Yes.
It's like you wheel him out like you're sort of star striker in a football match or something. You know, why aren't you playing Lionel Messi? This is the Champions League final. So they just viewed Boris as being this star performer based upon his, charismatic buffoonery.
Yes, and a lot of people said to me, people who frankly should know better, but this is what happens when you sort of operate on the notion that politics is in any way rational. He's definitely blown it now. He's shot his bolt now. That attempt to unseat Theresa May, the lead, well, not to unseat her, to challenge her, the leadership bid that was scuppered by his own consigliere after Michael Gove woke up to the depth of Boris Johnson's dishonesty and deceit. A lot of people said he's blown it now. Brexit's blown it. He's blown it. He's blown it. The truth's out. They've seen and I said, I promise you, never say never with Boris Johnson. And today's polling suggests that once again, I was right. Craig, thank you. Giles is in Reading. Giles, what does he stand for?
Well, I think his effect is just to show complete gullibleness as a nation. I mean, I haven't lived in any other different country, but it seems that we have this, or a lot of people have this belief in something that they just cannot see.
A belief in what? What do people who like Boris Johnson believe in? Because they don't believe in any of the things that traditional conservatism champions. Or at least he doesn't, so why do they believe in him?
Well, I think he does. He has this sort of everything about him. Every ingredient is a sort of quintessential gentleman. And
Gentlemen? Gentlemen don't cheat on their wives or betray their friends.
But the whole brand, if you like, the brand Boris, it's sort of it has this momentum behind it, this power that people just sort of.
But why, Giles? Why?
I don't know. It's the same reason. Like I think my gran, God bless her, not that I'm religious, but she would let someone in the front door who he looked lovely and smart, and he had his he had a lovely suit on, and then this guy would probably run out with a pension book.
With the family, so he's a spiv, isn't he?
Yeah, it's that.
He's a spiv, that kind of external. I mean, he even changed his name. I don't think he was even christened Boris. I got a brilliant text a minute ago that said an awful lot of his undeserved admiration would not have occurred if he'd been named Keith. I think that tallies with what you're saying, doesn't it?
It's the branding. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with Keith, to be fair,
no.
but I take that point brilliantly.
It's the whole brand. It's the whole ingredient. As you say, I mean, him walking on onto the stage, or he will mess up his hair to look the part. It's very choreographed. It's the branding, yes, and I it's bizarre. I think in these times, that's all these people, these are supporters of the Conservative Party, they probably have.
But they look. I don't do lazy tribalism. It's impossible to do lazy tribalism when you haven't got a tribe. But there are lots and lots of people who are conservative to their core, who stand for really noble, decent principles. I don't like the way they've co-opted Christianity as a kind of rationale for some of Ian Duncan Smith's callousness. But it is not fair to say that everybody who votes Conservative is hates the poor, or is bigoted or prejudiced or old-fashioned. I hesitate to sound like a cliche, Giles, but some of my best friends vote Conservative, and everything they believe in, Boris Johnson, well, not to put too fine a point on it, he defecates on from a great height on an almost daily basis.
Well, unfortunately, he doesn't have a heavy hitter in the other direction.
No.
He doesn't have someone that has that brand, has that likable brand, but actually speaks the values. And I don't know any other Conservative that's maybe got maybe a bit of youth on their side that really kind of that could strike a chord with the public like that. I think he is in there's a bit of a vacuum there, and he's filling it.
Yes, well, and again, I want to know why, because nothing that I've said is untrue. Nothing that I've said is susceptible even to the vaguest refutation. It can't be. It's all on the record. It's all on the record. I haven't even mentioned the love child running around Chelsea, a man who apparently is the darling of the Tory shires, who are supposed to turn their noses up at adultery and that kind of thing more pertly than they do at almost anything else. Why? So call me now, we won't fall out. If you still like him, despite, and you are a proper Conservative, you consider yourself a Conservative. I don't want you to phone me up and say I like him because of the bants, James. I like him and I am a Conservative. Just square that circle for me. I don't see how you can. I genuinely don't. And in answers of what he believes in, so far I've got one word. In fact, I'm going to make sure it's two words, because it adds to that kind of mystique that Giles so winningly described, doesn't it, to let him go by one name. So we'll call him Johnson, actually. What does Boris Johnson believe in? Answer, Boris Johnson. And that years spent searching for the key to understanding the mystery wrapped up in the conundrum that is the curious appeal of Boris Johnson, solved for me this morning. I know exactly what makes him tick, because he thinks that Churchill only opposed Hitler as a career move, thinking that further down the line it would pay dividends. Absolutely astonishing levels of cynicism to believe that of anybody else, let alone this country's finest wartime leader since Henry V. Astonishing. But how on earth could you think that of anybody else? Well, easy. That's how you operate. It's the only way you could. The world has turned into a kind of I know you are, but what am I at the moment, hasn't it? I told you this last year, that it was going to. You predicted to you they'll start trying to claim that the left-wingers are the real fascists and that kind of thing. People who were pretty much silent when Joe Cox was murdered by a white supremacist terrorist will start bleating about how frightened they are of liberals or how frightened they are of left-wingers. It is very easy to track if you read history, but I'd never come across, before finding this paragraph in Boris Johnson's biography of Hitler, I'd never come across anybody attempting to use, of Churchill, attempting to use well-documented history, and indeed a national hero of well-documented history, to sort of portray themselves as identical. Why did Churchill choose to oppose Hitler? Well, same reason that I've chosen to oppose the European Union. It's going to pay dividends for my career. It'll probably get me into Downing Street. That's what he means, isn't it? It came back and he said it paid off in spectacular fashion. Well, look at that. He opposed Hitler in the early 30s when most of the cabinet were making all sorts of overtures towards Berlin. And then, lo and behold, fast forward 10 years, he's in Downing Street. And that is all that matters, in my humble opinion. 10:38 is the time. What do you think he stands for? And the 23% of Conservative members who've said they would choose him in the leadership poll, knocking Ruth Davidson into second place, a 4% lead over her. What is it they like about a man who absolutely denigrates every single strand of principle and tradition that the Conservative Party is supposed to represent? And if you find me in the position of defending the traditions and principles of the Conservative Party, you know that this is a question that admits a million different answers. What the hell do they see in him? Unless they're just like him and they don't care about principles or marriage vows or honesty or integrity or decency. They just care about what? Jokes and power? What's the point of being in power if you're led by a liar? What's the point of having a party led by a man who admits, when writing about Churchill, that every decision he ever makes is driven by the question of what's going to be best for him in the long run? Not the party, not the country, but him. Almost as if it was an accident that we won the war. Let's go to Mill Hill, shall we? Zara's there. Zara, what does he believe in?
Hi, James. Yeah, I was just thinking about this myself, and I just thought that, he's almost evolved himself into the ultimate patriot, hasn't he? And, I sometimes think that he'd like nothing better than to have his photograph printed on the on the Union Jack.
You mean patriot in the Dr. Johnson sense of the word, being the last refuge of a scoundrel, because he couldn't act less in the national interest if he tried. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you, but I think that there is an appeal, because I remember when he was the mayor of London, and, I'm a Londoner, and I used to love him when he was mayor of London, because he used to really be passionate about London and put London first. And
what did he do you think? I suspect you've had a bit of a change of mind since then, but think back to those heady days. Yeah. Think back to those heady days of Boris Johnson being passionate about London and putting London first, and tell me what he did, what he achieved, what his greatest legacy for this city was.
Well, I'm not talking about it in terms of achievements. I'm talking about more from what his public image was.
Don't care about his public image. What did he do? Put some flesh on the bones.
Sadly, I think that this public image is what sways people.
And now we're sneering.
Like or dislike.
Now we're sneering. Now we're saying to 23% of Conservative members, you're too stupid to see what he's really like. And unless they ring me and tell me what he's really like, or what it is that they can see that we can't see, we're casting the role of being sneering metropolitan elites. It's a beautiful little trick.
I think that's the problem, because we're so split now that what one half of the country sees is totally the antithesis of what the other half.
Right, which 1/4 of the Conservative Party membership? I'm pretty sure it's not half of the country. There are plenty of people in the Conservative Party in the House of Commons, let alone in the country at large, who think Boris Johnson is probably even worse than I've portrayed him as this morning, because it's their futures that he plays fast and loose with. Can we come up with a slightly more charitable interpretation of what 23% of Conservative members are doing when they decide that being a lying, adulterous cheat is a suitable qualification for leading their party?
Sadly, I can't think of one, because...
Well, try harder, please.
I'm kind of... I'm really trying hard to find what it is that, people see in him. And even the point that he made about Churchill... saying
that genuinely disgusts me. That actually disgusts me. I can be a bit knockabout with him, and I've got friends of both genders who've cheated on their partners, and I get very moralistic about it, but not enough to say you can't be my friend anymore. It's private business, so I can get knockabout about all of that. Oddly, that Churchill thing has really hacked me off.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But again, it kind of, the disdain comes from a sense of, again, nationalism, which is, why are you messing in another country? You need to stick to your own.
It's not even a genuine nationalist. I mean, I don't mean that because of course he only gave up his American passport a couple of years ago, and he made a beautiful documentary for the BBC extolling the virtues of Turkey and explaining why it would be wonderful to invite them into the European Union at the earliest possible opportunity. It's almost like satire when I hear this stuff coming out of my mouth. It's all true, Zara.
No, I know, and my biggest complaint is how he's lied and deceived the general public.
Well, that's the fashion. I mean, look at America. Lying is cheats do prosper. It's the hardest lesson of all to teach your children, and in fact, you probably shouldn't teach your children that. Otherwise, they'll turn into cheats and liars as well. Cheats do prosper. Liars win. Donald Trump is president of America. Brexit is happening. How dare you, James O'Brien? Says Simon in Holmfirth. My cat is called Keith, and he has very high morals and a deep respect for the opposite sex. Thank you. If you're wondering what on earth Simon in Holmfirth is referring to, it's the suggestion that if Boris Johnson had been called Keith, approximately 80% of his appeal would dissipate overnight. It speaks to a curious English affection for the eccentric. That's probably why he changed his name as a kid from Alexander to Boris, in much the same way for the opposite reasons that George Osborne changed his name from Gideon to George. Gideon sounds more like Boris, but Osborne knew he didn't have the pizzazz and the personality to pull off a Gideon, so he changed his name to George. Even at university, these people are thinking about what's going to play best with the gullible public. 10:43 is the time. Zara, thank you. If you're struggling to get through, don't blame me. I can't believe it either. But nobody actually yet has risen to the genuine challenge of telling me what they like about him. 0345 6060 973. Ed is in Wigton in Cumbria. Ed, what would you like to say? What does he stand for first?
Well, what he stands for, really, my dad's quite a hardcore conservative, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And he seriously likes Boris Johnson, especially after, I think it was after one of the debates, and Boris Johnson tried to tackle that guy from Labour. And I think after that, it just clicked for me why he liked him. And it's the same way people liked Trump in America. I'm glad you brought it up early, because I didn't want to be the one who brought it up.
No.
But it's more an anti-left thing, I think. It's more like Jeremy Corbyn's been, painted as the enemy by loads of right-wing papers. And it seems to be something more along that line, if you know what I mean.
So say that again, that last bit.
The thing is, Jeremy Corbyn has been painted, and in fact the left as a whole, not just Jeremy Corbyn,
yes,
has painted, as you said, they've been called a real fascist and everything, with the attacks on, with the saying they attack free speech in America and such. It seems to me be like Boris Johnson and also Trump are seen as these strong guys who could be an opposing force to the left, sort of like a barrier to protect the country from left-wing ideals.
But any of them could do that. I suppose, in a way, if you're describing the Corbyn project as worrying these people, then what they need is someone to come out with all guns blazing, regardless of substance and evidence. But this is a 20-year project. Boris Johnson's career of calumnies goes back to his very first posting on the Times, from which he was fired for making up a quote from his own godfather. I mean, it's not a recent development. It's the fondness for him that I'm intrigued by. Where do you think that comes from? Is it just, we're overthinking it. It's a bit like, we liked TV presenters. We like pantomime characters. We like music hall performers. We don't really care about what's going on under the bonnet. We're only interested in what's on the surface.
Well, I think for that, it's I think that links more to the fact that, at least in where I'm around, people love that sort of cocky guy in a pub or something like that. Yeah. I think that's what it really boils down to. People
even when he makes a pass at your wife?
Oh, well, some people like that. I'm not sure about everyone, but...
Up in the lakes. Thank you, Ed. 10:46 is the time. So anyone going to rise to the challenge of telling me what it is he stands for politically? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. There's a real chance he could be Prime Minister. Probably less of a chance than there has been in recent years. But I said to you, anybody who said to me, he's shot it now, he's lost it, he's blown his chance, he's missed it. When Gove pulled out his sort of consigliere, his putative number 2, pulled out of that leadership campaign to launch his own, that was it for Boris, people said. I'd never write him off. What did he say himself? If the ball comes loose from the back of the scrum. He is now embarked upon an absolutely desperate attempt to get Theresa May to sack him, because then he can set up his court as the king across the water. If he remains as Foreign Secretary and the reality of Brexit continues to emerge, then he can't. He can't say it had nothing to do with him. If she keeps him in the foreign... I mean, this is British politics reduced to the most pathetic of playground squabbles. It almost makes you nostalgic for the days when British politics was reduced to the continuation of a battle of egos occurring in a common room at Eton College. This is playground. Boris Johnson is desperate for Theresa May to sack him. Theresa May can't sack him because when Brexit goes south, as she knows it will, as it already is, he needs to have his hand on the tiller. He has to be in the Foreign Office. Otherwise, he can turn around and say, hey, as the sort of Shaggy of the political world, it wasn't me. And she can't let him do that because she knows the threat that that would pose to the stability of the Conservative Party in the future, or in the short term to her own current leadership. If he resigns as Foreign Secretary, he's walking away from a mess that he made. If he gets sacked, he can blame the mess on someone else. And you can take that to the bank. He will betray his friends, cheat on his wife, change his views on the turn of a hat, and treat the British public like credulous fools. I suppose you could say much of the same about Donald Trump, and he has been spirited to the pinnacle of power in his country. Will Boris Johnson achieve the same? He's dedicated his entire adult life, you could argue, to that lofty goal, and believes that even his alleged hero Churchill was similarly cynical and only stood up against Hitler in the early 1930s because he thought it would deliver a big career political payday further down the line. In fact, he wrote in that biography, and it really paid off 10 years later. I just find that staggering. Maybe I'm naive. I just presume that if you stand up against fascism, you do it because you feel you have no choice. It can be injurious, both professionally and personally, as the fascists do well. So you suffer. Why do you think fascists shoot their critics? There's only one reason why. And by fascist, I would include sort of far left as well. So whether you're talking about Stalin or Hitler, why do you think they shoot their critics? Because their critics are right. It's the only way you can silence true criticism. If the criticism is wrong, you can laugh it off, or you can just dismantle it. But you get that that's what a baying mob is, you know. Lock her up, or stone him, wherever you are in history. Get him off the radio, make it stop. Why? It's fine if it's not true. Just let it wash over you. No anti-fascist ever calls for a fascist to be denied the right to speak. They might say it's a little bit unseemly to let them speak here in this room full of nice people. It's a little bit unkind to put them on a platform in a room full of people of colour when they're going to be spouting racist bigotry. But you have to be able to spout it. Otherwise, you can't have it explained to you why you're wrong. But the opposite of that, of course, is your genuine fascism, which is to shoot, to hang, to execute critics, journalists, intellectuals, academics, all in the queue for the gas chambers under Adolf Hitler. Why? Because they were right. He was a murdering, bigoted, racist, anti-Semitic monster. And the only way he could keep the public behind him was to silence all dissent and criticism. That's why Churchill stood up to him, not because he thought it was going to deliver a payday and the keys to Downing Street 10 years down the line. The very fact that Boris Johnson could write those words, read them again during revision and not think, oh dear, the mask slipped a bit there, old fruit. I don't think the people are going to buy the idea that Churchill was a cynical opportunist who only stood up to the Nazis in the hope of getting a payday 10 years down the line. That might be how I operate, but I don't think old Winnie quite fits the bill on that one. So he would have reread that and still thought, yeah, of course he is. Everyone's like me. The only reason why Churchill ended up in 10 Downing Street is because he made an opportunistic, cynical decision in the early 1930s to stand up to the Nazis. Because principles don't exist in the minds of men like that. Genuine principles that you'd go to the wall for, bridges that you'd die on. You'd change your tune about key and important issues at the turn of a card. You write 2 columns, both endorsing and rejecting the most important political decision this country has made since Suez. You are the very definition of a charlatan. Principles do not exist in your political universe. Everything is pragmatism and self-advancement. That's just a matter of record. You can tell we're keeping 2 phone lines free for anybody who wants to challenge anything that I've said about the man. Anything at all. 0345 6060 973. So then the question becomes, how can 23% of Conservative Party members, be cool with that. Be comfortable with it. Are they wearing blinkers? Do they have their fingers in their ears? It's very fashionable at the moment. Or is there something, as is often the case, that I am missing? There's a reason why you don't care that he's an adulterous liar. There's a reason why you don't care that he's a proven cheat and dissembler. There's a reason why you don't care that he writes 2 columns, both endorsing and rejecting crucial political decisions, and sits there waiting to see which one he thinks will deliver him the biggest boost subsequently. Then he makes his decision, for good or for ill. Why don't you care about that? What is it he offers that cancels out all of that stuff? I've got a horrible feeling the answer's pretty ugly. Christian's in Norwich. Christian, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. I'm not sure I can follow that monologue.
I don't know where it's coming from today. I think I'm a little bit demob happy for the weekend, Christian.
Well, I mean, actually, my point might pick up on the kind of the splitting character of Boris Johnson.
Yes.
So what I wanted to offer was, it occurs to me that the sole objective of any political party is to be in power, regardless of political landscape.
Yes.
And we saw this with the Brexit vote. The Conservative Party effectively split themselves in half to ensure representation following Brexit. So I'm wondering if the question shouldn't be what does Boris Johnson stand for, but what is again happening in the Conservative Party? Because for me, this is all calculated. This isn't happening by chance. So that's what I wanted to...
What do you mean? What's calculated? The sort of managed chaos that is Brexit, or broader?
I think whatever is happening with Boris Johnson and his popularity within the Conservative Party is calculated in terms of how it's disseminated in public view, just as...
So they're not voting for what they particularly believe in, they're voting for what they think the public is most likely to swallow, and if they want a Conservative Prime Minister, then Boris is their man.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
That's what I think. And again, we saw this with Brexit. Boris Johnson, as you rightly said in your monologue, writing two letters that contradicted one another, splitting themselves in half to ensure that representation. And I just wonder if this is all part of this great game of staying in power.
Yes, I mean, again, it puts us in the slightly uncomfortable position of second-guessing the motivation of people whose behaviour we find somewhat baffling. And even if you're largely right, it's all about choosing who they think is most likely to win a general election. It still doesn't address the question of how they can park their own morals at the door, unless, of course, ensuring that there's a Conservative Prime Minister in Downing Street is more important than all of the values and appeals to integrity that routinely make up what many Conservatives see as the heart of their party. Having started the programme at 10 o'clock, Christian, thank you, suggesting that no one was going to ring me. Again, always slightly tongue-in-cheek, because if we absolutely insisted that people can only come on air with a genuine answer to the question of what does Boris Johnson stand for, I'm not sure any of those calls would have got on. The phones are ringing off the hook. I'd quite like some people to have a crack at me as well. Not so much on the... personal level necessarily, just on the veracity of every single thing I've said. Oh, come on, James, he's a politician, and you get good and bad on either side. There are people who are adulterous, people who have dubious sexual histories, but to bash Boris to this extent is very amusing, as you could do a hatchet job on Corbyn or one of his close advisors. I can't read that out because it's hugely, hugely libelous. And then you allege that the national press are happy to sit on this information for now. I'd take the first half of your text and say, fine, you don't mind about the family values. But my point is that the Conservative Party core membership does. They are supposed to care passionately about honesty, integrity, fidelity, marriage, all of these things. That's all. You're entitled not to. I'm a little bit sententious on these issues. I have fallen out with people over their sexual attitudes, sexual behaviour. I hate knowing that someone's cheating on someone, and it hasn't happened to me for years, but when it did, I felt the need to pick a side, But if they were seeking public office, I wouldn't have any contradictions within me at all. You're seeking public office. I look at you and decide, how do I know whether you're trustworthy or not? You look at Boris Johnson. In fact, let's stick that on the list as well. What do you see in Boris Johnson that makes you think he might be trustworthy? We could get 3 hours out of this. 0345 606 0973. What does he believe in? Why do Conservative core members, who are supposed to believe in everything that he denigrates, like him so much? And finally, what was it? What was that stroke of genius I just came up with a minute ago that's fallen out of my mind in the ensuing 36 seconds? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. No, what does he believe in? Why do people like him? And I had one other. I just had another then when I said I'd get 3 hours out of it. Am I the only one paying attention? Yeah, you're not, though, James. Gary is in Tooting. Gary, what would you like to say?
Well, hello, James. I rather enjoyed your evisceration of our Foreign Secretary earlier on. But what I'm going to try and do is present an explanation, perhaps not the explanation, of why he is so popular.
Go on.
And I think there's an element, I want to say, of Trump in this as well, in that he kind of embodies a kind of a myth about a Britain that's past. And my key to that isn't so much your quote about Churchill as the famous photograph of the Bullingdon Club.
Yes.
Because there they are, the entitled group there, those who are born to lead, those who give us answers to questions. And they're not, the awkward accents of John McDonnell and the grammar school clever boys, and heaven help some people who reach...
Hang on, there's not a lot wrong with being clever, is there? In the context of leading the country, at least.
But there is a group of people who don't want to hear those counter narratives and don't want them presented by voices who do not come from those who enjoyed, shall we say, droit de seigneur in the past.
Well, this is my... yes, go on.
But he may be a lord of the manor.
And that appeals to a deferential strand of our nation that possibly we didn't realise existed until a couple of years ago.
Well, it's always been there. And
I know it has, but I thought it had gone. I'd argue, I would have argued that the welfare state and the NHS and the triumph of Nye Bevan and that kind of political project had put deference, this notion that we don't deserve stuff. Oh, it's not for the likes of us, son. Tug your forelock. Have my daughter, which is a slightly vulgar translation of what you mean by droit de seigneur. This notion that there are people who are born to rule, and if they're born to rule, they can do whatever the hell they want to the rest of us.
But it's an easy answer in a world of turbulence and of confusion, of an iconography that seems to change with each day. You go back to flag, you go back to simpler times, and all of that melts away, and you're left with something which is comforting. Of course, it has contradictions, but you leave the contradictions aside, and you build a narrative that says, here are the answers. I'm the sort of person who always gave you answers, and things were better then, and so I'm going to give you the answers again. And I'm not saying people are stupid or foolish, but...
You kind of are a bit.
No, the 23% of that particular constituency. We all know that the Tory party are quite old. Many of those people who want Boris Johnson as leaders will be in advanced years. And the older I get, and I'm sure you feel the same, James, because you're not much younger than I am, is you look for these answers, and the world does get complicated. I see what my kids do, and there's a whole world of...
It's incredibly complicated, and it's getting more complicated. And if someone stands up and says, it's really easy, it's all the fault of immigrants, it's really easy, it's all the fault of the European Union, life's not complicated at all, it's all the fault of the Muslims, or the Piccaninnies with their watermelon smiles, then it is actually quite seductive for people who are hard of thinking.
It's not just hard of thinking, perhaps. We should be a little more generous.
Yeah, you're right. I apologise.
Why should everyone have to deal with the huge volume of stuff that flies at us day in, day out? Not just, James, through the media, but also through even relatively straightforward things like making a claim for a child tax credit and so on and so forth. Yeah. An hour doing that, and you just think, please make the world more straightforward. Please give me someone who explains this. And that national narrative is something that Boris Johnson can embody, perhaps better than anybody else.
Well, blimey. So he is a sort of cross between John Bull and the Churchill bulldog that flogs insurance on the telly.
Well, you
yes.
You mentioned Henry V, and Henry V, of course, goes round the battlefield at Agincourt, disguised as a commoner, and he speaks to the soldiers to gauge their views. But he goes back to being Henry V after that. And, maybe Boris has an element, not of the heroism of Henry V, but that ability to communicate with large groups of people and be able
I'm not letting you. I'm not. I mean, you're a very erudite man, but you can't have that. I mean, he's not going around. He goes around speaking to ordinary people disguised as a serf. It's a ridiculous suggestion. He doesn't do that at all. Or are you suggesting that's the 21st century equivalent of appearing on Have I Got News for You?
It's 21st century of appearing on Have I Got News for You. It's 21st century of appearing in mass market, a columnist on mass market newspapers. It's a 21st century equivalent of having various surrogates and mouthpieces tweeting and supporting you. There is something in it. I admit the analogy is somewhat forced, but there is something in it. And, it works and it continues.
But then why don't... I mean, in a sense, I suppose I'm unlikely to get too many calls from them, but I promise them, if they are thinking of ringing in, that I will give them a fair hearing. Why would people who pride themselves on a kind of a Protestant Christian morality or on genuine small c conservatism, a belief in traditions and principles that speak to stability, why would they buy into it? Because they're not. I mean, your average Conservative Party member, you may disagree with this, but in my mental image of them, they're not forelock-tugging, deferential peasants. They're kind of people who think that they're part of the ruling class. And how could they put up with this man who absolutely denigrates everything they claim is intrinsic to their party's values?
Well, my only suggestion, and it's not a very good one, is that particular ace is roughed by this national mythology, this need to hang on.
Yes. Yes. So what you're doing, you're speaking to something that's been bubbling away in the back of my brain for a couple of years, which is you keep being rational, you keep looking for the keys, you keep trying to understand it. The point is there is something on offer so loud and clamorous and powerful that it drowns out all of your rational, logical, policy-based questions. He represents something really massive and ugly in the same way that Donald Trump does, in the same way that Farage does. This notion of essentially kind of, well, we're talking about a form of white supremacism, aren't we? And Boris Johnson, whether he believes it or not, seems to be hopping onto that tiger.
Well, why does Mark Antony win when Brutus speaks to the minds of hoi polloi and Mark Antony speaks to the hearts? And Mark Antony wins. I
have the best callers. Bless you, Gary. Thank you very much indeed. See, today my callers have cited a film of which I've forgotten the title, starring Jane Seymour and Judge Reinhold, and they've cited Henry V, Antony and Cleopatra, and the curious failure of Mark Antony to persuade the mob with reason and facts and evidence that he was right. I got the best callers. SA is in Abbey Wood. The bar is high, SA. Do not duck under it. What would you like to say?
Hi, James. First of all, I'm a first-time caller, so I'm really, really nervous.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. It's only me.
I've been listening to you since your beef with Ian Lee when you had the race. I've been looking for the clip on YouTube. I can't find it anywhere.
It's around. Ian keeps it. Ian keeps archives of everything, bless his cotton socks. It is around somewhere. Obviously, I don't keep it because I was humiliated in public, not for the first time, and just sort of romped home in half a lap behind him. But we're losing the room, SA. What did you ring in to tell me? Thank you for the kind words.
Anyway, I was a huge fan of Boris Johnson. I was a huge fan. And many of my friends and my relatives just couldn't understand it. They said, what is wrong with you?
You're like a punch cartoon. Yes, carry on.
They were like, why do you like this man? It doesn't make sense. This is how he is. And I thought, no, he's fantastic. I think I can just boil it down to one word, James. Charisma. I think that's what it is.
Yes.
Because I couldn't stand the previous mayor, Ken Livingstone. I thought he was anti-aspiration. He wanted everybody to drive a Prius. He said things like, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Things like that. And he extended the congestion charge to the west, and then he didn't extend it to the east, where you had Hackney and all those areas. If it's about congestion, it is about pollution.
You are making me nostalgic for the days when you could criticise Ken Livingstone without mentioning Hitler.
If it is about pollution,
yes.
The air does not decide where is east and where is west.
Well, hang on. Let's not go too far down that rabbit hole. Let me steer you back towards your previous admiration for Boris. What made you change, if indeed you have changed?
What made me change was the day, and I remember this clearly because I was on a Sunday. I was driving from London Bridge to North London, and I heard on the radio Boris Johnson come out and declare for leave. And I knew instantly why he did it, because it was just so blatant that it was for his personal, reasons. He didn't think Lee was going to win because nobody thought he was going to win. So for him to do what he did, it was so clear that he was playing a strategic game, so that when...
But all politicians play strategic games up to some point, don't they?
Yes, but what upset me is that he put the future of the country at stake ahead of his personal gain. You see, I thought it was treacherous of him to do what he did, because he put...
Yes, but if you liked Brexit, if you were still sort of clinging to the notion that we're going to be anything other than diminished and damaged by it, you're still buying into that notion. And speaking of that, I've got a wonderful update on that ludicrous claim, or that apparent silver lining that our exports have gone up as a result of the pound plummeting. I've got a special report coming on that in half an hour. But if you still bought into the Brexit baloney, you'd still like him. So it's a very personal reason why you've gone off him. But these 23% of Tory voters, they might still be on the Brexit bandwagon, on the 350 bus. So we're not understanding why they're still on board, are we?
I don't. I mean, I just think that some people just don't like other people. That's all I can think about. Because if you think about it,
you've finished me. You've done it. I'm off air. I'm going home.
If you think about it,
some people just don't like other people. How can I possibly make you happy? Please go and hurt that person over there. That will make me happy.
Exactly. Because. If you listen to Brexiteers, and I listen to them a lot on the radio,
yes,
and there's a similar theme. There's this kind of anger in their voice. There's a kind of bitterness, that you can't really put your finger on.
Well, you just did put your finger on it. They think their happiness depends on making other people miserable, hurting other people, deporting other people, punishing other people, interning other people, diminishing other people, making other people into second-class citizens, stopping other people from being able to do things. That's what they think will make them happy. The tragedy of history with regard to far-right or totalitarian regimes, thank you to Gary for giving me the word I need to conflate far-right with far-left, is that it never makes anybody happy. It doesn't even make the people in charge happy.
Yeah. I mean, it was such. That was when the scales dropped from my eyes, and I always used to be a conservative voter, and now I can never ever vote conservative again.
Really?
Ever.
That's a bit strong. What? Just because of him?
Never. Oh well, just because of him, and how after Brexit, then I saw the true colours. I saw what my friends and relatives have been warning me about for years, that I thought David Cameron had moved us forward from. Because David Cameron kind of changed the Conservative Party and brought it to the 21st century. And now you have people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and his own...
Taking it back to the early 18th. Yes, it says. You're a great caller. This is a brilliant debut, but I'm 3 minutes late for the break. Take that as a compliment. There are people paid to listen to this programme. I'm looking at them now, and not one of them could tell me what it was I said approximately 30 seconds before I said, what did I just say 20 minutes ago? So my thanks to everybody listening who isn't getting paid to listen, who does pay attention. The word, it was trustworthy. My third question. What would you point at if you were trying to prove to a sceptical audience that Boris Johnson can sometimes be trustworthy? 0345 6060 973. Because neither of his marriages, none of his jobs, and I would cautiously suggest not a single one of his public pronouncements would provide any evidence that he can be trustworthy. So this isn't a trick question. He is the most popular, putative leader of the Conservative Party, according to the membership. And so far, we have proved utterly unable to catalogue what his political principles are. What does he truly believe in, apart from, self-advancement? And what would you point to as proof that he's trustworthy? I'll take anything you've got. You know how this switchboard works. Very, very busy, but we can always find a way through. And the second question in this sort of unholy trinity is the one that fascinates me the most, as sort of someone who, we spent a long time yesterday discussing the plight of people like me who feel politically homeless at the moment. You're almost feeling any port in a storm. Centrism is curiously misrepresented word. Centrism could be provided in the current political context from people on the liberal wing of the Conservative Party and from people on the what they call the Blairite wing of the Labour Party. So if you were looking to the Conservative Party as a potential political home, and you were a bit old-fashioned, I can be a bit old-fashioned on issues like marriage and family values and child rearing. I can get pretty close to Victorian Puritanism on some social policy and moral issues. So there could be a home for someone like me in the Conservative Party if they could just explain the redistribution of wealth a little better, bring in a kind of slightly more equitable approach to the poor. I could be up for grabs. My vote could be yours. So how could I join a party where the most popular potential leader is a man who absolutely denigrates and rejects all of those principles? That's what intrigues me the most. So I would really, I'm not going to beg. Yeah, all right, I'll beg. Please ring me if you are a fully dyed-in-the-wool Conservative. You recognise my description of you as someone who cares about morals, someone who cares about marriage, someone who cares about honesty and integrity and consistency and truth. And that, in your mind, is why you are a Conservative. And you also think Boris Johnson should be leader. I just want to look inside your brain for a minute or two. Hit the numbers now. You won't, but next time I say you will, you will. John is in Enfield. John, what's going on?
Well, what I'd like to say, Boris Johnson's politics flows with the tide.
I'm not going to give you any prizes for that, John.
Well, it's self-preservation.
Yes.
In reality, we want somebody that's in there that's a real radical. It's going to change. Follow the money. Finances and so on and all that, reconstructure it, the whole thing.
So
and
what
the Labour Party are referring to that.
They may be. We did 2 hours on the Labour Party yesterday. I'm interested in the other lot today. What do you think this 23% of Conservative members are seeing that either makes them not care about the negatives you've just described or not perhaps even notice them?
Because the leadership is open for grabs, and there's nobody that has the tenacity and morals to actually tackle things as they really are, as the general public see them.
Say that bit again. Say that again.
We're actually a country that's bankrupt.
Yes, but why would people think he could be the answer to these problems? That's what I'm trying to unpick this hour.
He's not going to be the answer.
No, I know that, but why do you think people think he might be?
Why do they? Because they're stupid. They're not following they haven't followed what's actually happened.
I'm desperately trying to avoid that conclusion, but you're perfectly entitled to arrive at it. Mine is, if anything, actually even more insulting. I think we're looking at a political landscape where people like me can drive ourselves potty trying to work out why other people are doing what they're doing. The answer is, it makes me feel okay about being a racist again. It's why Donald Trump is president, and it's why Nigel Farage has a show on this radio station. He's made racism acceptable again. It's great. What's not to like? I've always been a racist. I felt really embarrassed and ashamed of it for years, and now I'm allowed to do it again. I don't even have to sort of fulminate in the comment section of the Daily Mail under a false name. If I'm a Nazi and I live in America, I don't even have to put a hood on my head anymore. I can march through the streets of Charlottesville and get described as very fine people by the President of America. Boris Johnson, I think, might be riding that tiger. He's got form on it. We know he has got form with the watermelons, those pickaninnies with their watermelon smiles. So maybe that's all it is. Yeah, well, this sort of undercurrent of modernism. I am a Tory, obviously, but I'm a racist first. And maybe that's his typical supporter. I hope not. I really do. But what else have we got so far? Barbara is in Bath. Barbara, what does he believe in?
Oh, James, I believe in you. And that's why I've never phoned you, my darling, because what's the point of phoning when I agree with whatever you say?
No, but you're supposed to disagree.
What are you, the Messiah or what?
No, I'm a very naughty boy. What does Boris Johnson believe in?
Believes in Boris.
Yeah.
Actually, seriously, James, his sister, Rachel, and his dad, what a lovely guy.
I don't know his dad.
Fantastic.
No, I'd stop, because this is the only thing that makes me feel a little bit wary, because I'm a nice person and I believe in decent values. So obviously when you go after someone who is none of those things, there's a little bit of you that thinks, well, hang on, hold back. And the thing that does that the most is actually his sister, who I think is utterly lovely. I saw her at the theatre the other night, Barbara, because those are the sort of circles that I mix in these days. So please leave them out of it. Focus on this man that wants to be Prime Minister, and tell me from the bosom of Bath, what does Boris believe in?
Boris believes in Boris. Now, the thing is, the Tories believe in Boris.
Yes.
Because how come somebody who's made an MP, right, for Hounslow, 2 weeks after he was made MP, or however short time it
Uxbridge,
was.
not Hounslow. It's Uxbridge. Hounslow's my patch.
Foreign Secretary.
Yeah,
I mean, please, how many top Tories who held seats for months and years never got the opportunity to get that job? Why has he got that job?
But you're doing the tail that's wagging the dog. I'm trying to focus on the dog today. I know that people think that he is electorally attractive because he is. He wins. But I know all that. What I want to know is why people who claim to have conservative values can park them so effectively. Is it simply because his potential popularity to them trumps all of their actual political principles?
Well, apart from your Trump's word.
Yes, sorry. Yes. You can't, but then we're painting them as...
That was naughty, James.
Yes.
That was naughty.
All right.
But actually, you're right. There is no personality. I mean, John Redwood, God, it's like Dracula personified, isn't it?
But the Labour Party front bench isn't exactly the, a variety show, is it? They're not going to win any prizes for charisma or comedy either.
There's none of them anymore. I used to watch Question Time and think they were all fantastic.
When did you last think that?
One iota of personality. Not one of them.
No, but when did you last think it was fantastic? What era are we talking about?
Well, Tony Blair was when he started. I mean, he was fresh...
Yeah, he was.
He was fresh, he was new. My husband was a Labour councillor, and the night he got in, we knew he would.
Yeah.
The night we got in, I said to my husband, oh, my God, can you believe this? Wonderful wife, clever wife, lovely guy, personality plus, lovely family, lovely dad. This is it.
Looks that way, although I'm trying to think from that era. Robin Cook resigned on principle over the Iraq War. It's hard to imagine anybody in the current crop on either side of the House resigning on a point of actual political principle. But I'm trying to think of, because... Heseltine I'd put in that list, even though he was before Blair's time. Ken Clarke, you must get a little frisson of it.
Ken Clarke.
Yeah, exactly. There are politicians on both sides who just seem to have bottom. They seem to have gravitas. They seem to be statesmen and women.
You'd watch Question Time, you'd like all of them. You wouldn't agree with them.
I might even accept their invitation to go on it again if they had people like that on the panel, Barbara.
Wonderful personalities and charisma. You'd want to watch it, to see them all performing.
And yet now, what do people get out of watching Boris? I hesitate. I've said it and I've put it out there, and it's out there, and I stand by what I've said as a suggestion, as a theory that I'd like you to explain that I'm wrong about. If you can park everything you believe in for somebody, what is it that he's giving you? Charitable answer, electoral success. Uncharitable answer, well, he's part of that Farage-Trump axis that's making it okay to be publicly bigoted again. And you would not believe how grateful people are to them for that. It's 11:32. The cupboard is still bare, I'm afraid. I feel like old Mother Hubbard. 3 questions. What does Boris Johnson believe in? 0345 606 0973. How can 23% of a party that stands for morality, family values, integrity, this is what members tell me, and I'm happy to believe them, and I know Conservative voters who passionately believe in all of these platforms of principle. How can 23% of them support a man who denigrates every single one of those values on an almost daily basis? And finally, can you just point at something from his entire life, which you have been following probably now for 2 decades, something that suggests he might be trustworthy? Like one example from his private... I suppose you could use the Darius Guppy example, couldn't you? When an old school friend phoned him up and asked to get a phone number, to get an address for a journalist, wasn't it? So that they could send someone around to beat him up. I suppose that maybe you could describe that as a form of loyalty, when Johnson said, yeah, all right, I'll do it for you, Darius, I'll do it for you. I don't think he actually did in the end. But, so he didn't even do that. Didn't even prove trustworthy to the convicted criminal who was trying to enlist his help in getting the address of a journalist so that they could hurt him. So what would you point at as evidence of his trustworthiness? 0345 606 0973 is the number that you need. It's 11:38. Peter is in Mitcham. Peter, what have we got? Come on, mate. The field is clear.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't help you on that score, James.
Well, any of them.
Well, on the score of I'm sorry, I've got a terrible echo coming back. Oh,
back?
Yes, back to me. It's
my
own voice coming back.
Back.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Right. I'll try to carry on, but it's quite disconcerting.
Right, okay, well, we'll come back to you, Joe. I don't want you to be disconcerted. Justin's in Caerphilly. Justin, what have you got for me?
Hello, James. I'm a first-time caller, and I realise that I'm probably setting myself up for a massive fail now. But
well, don't say that.
I do actually like Boris Johnson.
That's fine.
I've been listening to you
I get that. What does he believe in?
I think he believes in Britain. And I think he stands up for Britain, and I will tell you why. And feel free to shoot me down in flames.
Never. I'll gently lower you to the ground.
But no, I think what impressed me about Boris Johnson is when he actually made the decision to actually stand and vote for leave and support vote leave. And I think that when I remember at the time he was talking about with David Cameron. I know David Cameron offered him some very nice goodies if he actually sort of fell in line and actually went with and voted with the referendum sort of in the
if he went with the other column that he wrote the night before.
Well, I think so, and I think so. Therefore,
come on, mate, it's game over already, isn't it? You mean I really admire him. Because when David Cameron was saying that he'd give him a bauble if he went with the other column that he wrote the night before he published the one saying we should leave.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you carry on.
I used to read Boris's column and he wrote for the Telegraph, and I think one of the things that I got an overriding sense of was that he is very pro-European, and he makes the distinction between being pro-Europe and being anti-EU. And I think that, and I can go along with that. And I consider myself to be very pro-European, but I'm not particularly impressed with the EU and the way that it wants to create a United States of Europe.
And that's another thing Churchill said, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I'm not suggesting that Churchill was particularly right there. I think that Britain is a great country, and as Boris frequently does, he flies the flag for Britain. He's very pro-British, and
I mean, when you say pro-British, he has. I mean, regardless of what you think about Brexit, he has led us towards a plummeting pound. We're going to have a nightmare. Look at the Bombardier Boeing story. If we wanted to stand up to Boeing and we were 28, we were the largest trading bloc in the world, and we said, look, if Boeing does that, then we're going to cause problems. And he's led us out of that position. He's made us demonstrably poorer and weaker. How can that be an act of someone who loves this country?
I think that's very sadly inevitable when it comes to the decision we took.
Well, then I need to psychoanalyze you, because why? Right. What do you think I'm going to get out of you making the country I love poorer and less safe? What is it what's the bonus at the end of that process that makes it all worthwhile, Justin?
Okay, all right. I believe very strongly that when we are able to sign trade agreements with the rest of the world, when we are able to start moving onto the international platform, I think we will see enormous benefits to this country.
We've got trade agreements with the rest of the world as members of a market with 600 million customers. There's not a Scooby-Doo. There's not I mean, there really isn't a sparrow's chance in hell that a market of 60 million people can sign a better trade deal than someone with 600 million customers. You must understand that.
No, I do, but I think we are denying our standing, if you like, an international standing on the world stage. I think we are denying the fact that we have.
What do you think our biggest export is at the moment? What do you think our biggest export is at the moment? Because standing on a world stage is just a sentimental soundbite, isn't it?
Yeah, I accept that.
So what's our biggest export? When we resume our proper place on the world stage, what is it people are going to be queuing up to buy?
I think. Oh God, yeah. I mean. As I said, I think our tourism is tremendous. I think we are.
So how is tourism going to be increased by telling our closest neighbours that we don't want them to come and live here?
Well, we are also a manufacturer.
So what are people going to be queuing up to buy?
Well, what are they buying at the moment?
Well, 44% of whatever we sell is going into the European Union under tariff-free trade, so that can only go down. As we've seen, America can slap 219% on aircraft just because they feel like it. So you come on the programme and I respect you, but if you're going to use phrases like our standing on the world stage, I'm going to ask you what you mean by that. And the sad thing is, mate, with the greatest of love and affection, you haven't got a clue what you mean by that, which is why you like Boris Johnson, because he offers up utterly hollow and meaningless sound bites, and they bring out the flag waver in all of us, until you have a moment I arrived at 5 years ago, where you see him for the charlatan and the cheat and the liar that he is.
But what I don't understand is why people think that Boris Johnson was acting for Boris Johnson when he actually stood up and said that he would lead the vote.
Let me explain.
I don't understand.
Let me explain. It's not difficult to understand. He thought they'd lose. And he thought that Theresa May was a weak Prime Minister and that she would be toppleable very soon afterwards. And even though the referendum had been lost, if he could absolutely stone-cold guarantee the support of the Eurosceptic wing of the party by coming out as pro-Leave, then when he stood against George Osborne in the leadership election that would have followed, if they'd won, of course, the referendum, David Cameron had already said he was going to stand down. So the clever money would have seen Boris Johnson and George Osborne as the two final candidates in that match, and he would be bringing to the party all of the people who wanted to leave the European Union, and also, because they'd lost the referendum, he could court the support of people who'd voted to remain in it. That is it, in a nutshell.
But that doesn't make sense.
Oh, it does. Look at his face on the morning. Look at his face on the morning after they won, and tell me whether that looks like a man who's happy.
I think it was a shock for everybody. I think that, I just don't get it. Why would he actually assume that they were going to win when all the smart money was on the fact that Britain was going to vote to remain?
No, you haven't heard what I said. He thought they were going to lose. He wanted them to lose, but he wanted to shore up the support of everybody who wanted to leave, so that when he stood... Well, you just said yourself, all the clever money said we were going to remain. He backed the wrong horse, oddly. And you heard the top of the show, did you, when he thinks that Winston Churchill stood up to Hitler as a career move rather than an act of pure and noble principle. Well, that's where we began our analysis of Boris Johnson today, with his biography of Adolf Hitler, in which he describes standing up to the Nazis in the early 1930s as backing the right horse, and my God, it paid off 10 years later. That's how his mind works, Justin. Every single decision he's taken is based upon one question: what's best for me? I want to be Prime Minister. David Cameron is Prime Minister now. He said he's going to stand down. The referendum is a foregone conclusion. There's no way the country's going to be persuaded to punch itself in the face on that scale, but it might be close, and there's a lot of people in my party who think we should leave. Every Conservative leader since Heath has been undone by Europe. How can I possibly get the Eurosceptics on side while also being in a position to beg for the votes of the Remainers? Answer: come out for Leave, lose, and then have my cake and eat it. You're welcome.
I still don't get the coming out the losing bit, knowing that he was going to lose, because had Britain voted to remain in the EU, David Cameron would have continued to be Prime Minister.
No, he wouldn't. He'd already said, he told James Landale in 10 Downing Street that he would definitely not fight another election. So there was always going to be a leadership battle, and it was almost always going to be Osborne versus Johnson. And if Johnson can appeal to both sides, which he couldn't have done if he'd come out for Remain, then he's got a better chance of winning against Osborne. With the greatest of love and respect, this isn't complicated.
Okay.
And do you want just one? Just hang on, just before you go, I'll give you one other thing as well. Why do you think in the ministerial code is pretty clear that you can't use government resources to launch think tanks and to kind of get involved in any shenanigans like that? So why do you think he launched a think tank at the Foreign Office yesterday?
Again, I don't know what was his...
Well, let me tell you, he wants to be sacked by Theresa May so that when he walks away from the mess that Brexit becomes, he can claim it would have been better if he'd stayed. But she doesn't want to sack him because, as Foreign Secretary, he's got his hand on the tiller as we head towards the waterfall, and when we go over it, he's not going to be able to say, nothing to do with me, Gov. There you go. That's Boris Johnson 101, Justin.
No, James, I appreciate that, and I realised that, and I knew I was onto a loser when I...
No, you're not onto a loser. You're a decent man. You've been thoughtful, and there's nothing to be ashamed of when you get sold a pup by a liar, because he's very good at it.
Yeah, and listen, I wasn't honestly thinking that I was going to be coming on to support Boris Johnson, but I really do feel that it was, as I said, what I like about him, and I liked his speech at the Olympics. I like the fact that he does fly the flag for Britain. I think
you've got to stop saying things like that. He flies the flag for Britain, mate. He has led us over a cliff edge. Poorer, less safe, laughed at by the rest of the world, 4 million people's future put into the balance, our ability to stand up to a big boy like Boeing, utterly castrated by the fact that we've jettisoned the support and partnership of 27 close trading partners, and you think that's waving a flag, my friend?
Can I just add one final thing?
We're very late for the break, but yes, of course you can.
I'm sorry. I am totally pro-Europe. I think that we have a lot of friends in Europe and we have a good trading relationships. And I think if we had a free trade agreement with Europe, that would be fantastic. What I'm less enthusiastic about...
We've got a free trade agreement with Europe, mate.
Yeah, I know that, but
and you voted to get rid of it.
Because we have all this baggage that goes with it.
For example?
Well, all right, the very fact that we have a president of the European Union who is trying to increase ever closer union. He wants a.
And then we're back to Churchill. And if we're in the European Union, we're going to do an hour next week on what would be wrong with the European army. But a lot of people like Justin think it sounds awful, so that's why you stay in and veto it. So you've made the prospect of a European army even more likely, although we'll wait until next week to find out why that would be a bad thing. Like an army that is consisted of all of the countries that have spent the last 500 years trying to kill each other. Suddenly they're all on the same side, and that's a bad thing for Britain, because flags. 10 to 12. Quick text and then a very interesting Brexit story that Ed Conway, the economics editor of Sky News, has broken today. The text says, briefly, if Boris is such an opportunist, why is he not supporting a softer Brexit, which appears to be the only workable answer long term? Oh, mate, you've got to look up opportunist. You're absolutely right. That is, if we're going to Brexit, then the softer the better. But why wouldn't he support that? Because the softer the Brexit, the less likely he's got to get into Downing Street. So because he's an opportunist, he's not supporting a softer Brexit. It gives him the opportunity to get the keys to Downing Street. And anyway, honestly, I should charge you more for this kind of service. 11:55 is the time. Ed Conway is the economics editor at Sky News. And Ed, you have been examining that one silver lining of the plummeting pound, which is, of course, that it was good for exports. What have you discovered?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I spent a long time kind of digging through these numbers, and I've been sitting on this story for a while because I wanted to be sure about it. I going through these numbers actually to try to debunk myths on both sides. There's one kind of Remainer thing that I heard a lot, which is that the UK, is really reliant on exporting cars to Europe, and therefore, we need to be careful with what they do that we do there. So I looked at the numbers, and I kind of had this hunch that actually a lot of the cars went off to China. Really? And I dug through the data, and there indeed were a lot of car exports to China, but it turned out by far and away our biggest export to China was gold. And I thought, well, that's odd, because we don't actually mine any of the stuff. So I looked at the overall figures, and actually if you look at July, the last month for which we have numbers, our biggest export, so bigger than cars, we export about £2.8 billion worth of cars in July, £1.6 billion worth of engines, pharmaceuticals, the drug industry, one of the biggest things the UK makes, £1.4 billion, crude oil, 1.1 from the North Sea. Gold, we exported £3.4 billion worth of gold. It was bigger, considerably bigger than cars, bigger than any other export that we sent out of the UK. And it's all because London is the centre of the world's gold industry.
And this is a physical export, is it? It's not just a number on a balance sheet. This actual bullion is being moved from Britain to China.
Bullion passing, through, and it usually goes from Heathrow. If you're flying from Heathrow often to Zurich, you will probably, there will more often than not be some gold underneath the aisle.
And you sort of stumbled on this, almost.
But and the amounts are staggering. Obviously, it doesn't take many gold bars to make a few million, but the amounts are staggering. It's big, and this is a good story in that London is the centre of this trade. But what it does is, because a lot of this stuff goes to Switzerland, because it goes to China, because it goes to India, it makes it look as if we are actually sending more goods to those countries than we thought we were. And that statistic, actually both sides have been talking about it during the referendum.
Yes.
That about 44% of our goods, 45% go to the EU. It's a smaller number than the rest of the world. Actually, in this latest month, take off gold, and that 44% going to the EU becomes 51%. So the majority of our goods went to the EU in the last month when you would strip out gold, which, to be honest with you should be. And the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, are trying to do this, but they are only just getting onto it, and no one has realised just the scale of this and how much it distorts our picture of our trade with the rest of the world. I was kind of astounded by
Well, that's why it's a cracking piece of journalism. The challenge that lesser journalists face when we seek to track the sort of Brexit shenanigans is an ugly question, actually, which is, did they realise how wrong they were when they said this stuff, or did they honestly act in good faith? And it seems to me, Ed Conway, that this is one of those examples where people actually didn't realise that they were punting a complete confection, because they didn't realise that gold completely skews the overall figures of exports.
No, they didn't. I think this is, no one knew on either side, which is why both sides actually were giving the same statistics on this.
And that means that the claim that the plummeting pound has somehow been offset by the increase in exports is, it's falling apart like a cheap suit.
Yeah, well, lots of this gold is actually leaving the country because people are quite worried about, they're investing in gold. It's a safe haven asset, and they're taking it out and taking it to China because they're a bit worried about the state of the global economy, not just Brexit, but other things going on. But it's not necessarily a boost of our exports, and we need to kind of look closely at this stuff because this is what matters in the future. Brexit or Remainer, what matters is trying to get the best kind of a deal, and that means starting to understand just how much we export where, and this is the start of that job, really.
What, where, and why. Great work. You'll like this, Ed. Aaron's just tweeted to say, this story about gold was on Sky News last night.
It was, and it's on today as well, which, we're talking about it a lot because this is news. It is big stuff, and,
Indeed.
It matters,
It is, and we'll talk again. It's a cracking piece of work, that. Absolutely brilliant journalism. And, Aaron, for your benefit, you clearly missed me introducing Ed Conway, the economics editor at Sky News, so I shall reiterate that as I bid him farewell. That's it. We could carry on with this forever, but I have a sense that we're all dancing around the same gravestone now, and the fella in Caerphilly notwithstanding, the attempts to tell me what Boris Johnson believes in, what you would point to as evidence that he's trustworthy, or even give me an understanding of what it is that can tempt 23% of his own party to jettison their own passionate support of things like marriage and honesty, fidelity, integrity, consistency and truth, what he gives them in return.